Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the code. Um, this isn't an Arduino tutorial, so you will need to have a little bit of knowledge on how to program, how to set up an Arduino. I'll give you some information about how this specific piece of code works, but you will need to know how to set it up to begin with. One of the first thing is you need to have Arduino installed. That's a free program. You can get it. You also need to understand how to install libraries into Arduino. And a library is just basically a kind of a pre-made program that allows you to do things that normally you couldn't. So, for example, the way that these robotic servos they need a certain communication protocol and certain things that you might not know how to code, or it might be over your head or whatever, but somebody already did it for you and put it into this library. As long as you install it, it gives you a new set of commands that you can use that you normally wouldn't have. And that way you can tell the servo, I want servo number 1 to move to a specific position and do this and that. And so in this case, you will need a library called, let me show it to you here. The library is called Dynamixel to Arduino, and that's something that you can also get from Robotic. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all you need as far as libraries. So once you have your Arduino, you have your libraries, you download the sketch, which I will provide, and and it will help you calibrate your drum. So a lot of this stuff I'm not going to go over. Most of this you really don't need to mess with. It's just they're mostly settings, and a lot of this just comes straight from the example programs that I used as a starter sketch. I started with a simple program that shows you how to move a servo, and then I just started modifying it and turning it into what I wanted. So all right, so starting here, I created a bunch of variables. These are the variables right here. So that's all that means. As you have a servo number 1, because each robot is 2 servos. So you have the high position of 1, the low position of 1, high position, low position of 2, the position of the rotate. There's a bunch of things that you're going to be using, and they're right there. Defined as integers. But all of this is anything in the setup is just getting your servos ready. This again is just stuff that I just copied off of one of the sample sketches and just modified it into what I need. So it's looking for all of the servos, and it's setting them up and giving them a velocity acceleration curve. Again, stuff you don't really need to worry about. It's already there. What really matters is this, the loop. That's what it's actually going to do. And right here, it's saying it's going to check the analog pins, which are, let me see if I can get this around in front of the camera. Essentially, the analog pins are, we have an Arduino and we have all of our pots hooked up to it. They're all defined in the setup, and it's that's what these are. It's looking for analog information coming from these. So as you turn this dial, that analog signal changes. So it's going to check all those pins. It's going to check to see what position those pots are at. Like the next thing it does is it'll rotate the mallet. Based on the information it got from the pots. So it'll rotate the mallet to whatever angle you chose by turning these knobs, and then it'll hit the drum. So all of this here is basically saying it's going to print the information, all those numbers that it figured out based on where you put the knobs. It's going to put them on the screen, and that's it. It'll check for your pots. It'll move the drum, and it'll put all the data on the screen so you can look at it. The next thing you do is you upload You can use this button to check to make sure that there's nothing wrong with your program and you didn't make any mistakes. And then once you know that you are set up for OpenCM board and you're on the right COM port, then you can go ahead and plug it in to your serial port. And when you hit that button, it'll start compiling. Takes a little while to do that. It's uploading now. And it's done uploading. So at this point, now we can go ahead and move on to plugging this into the drum itself. Turning it on. And hitting the serial monitor, which is over, let me make sure you can see, over in this corner. And now, right here on this screen, let me zoom in a little, you can see that it's feeding data. So I'm going to start turning the first pot. The first pot tells you which servo you want to calibrate. So right now it says servo 5. So I'm going to start rotating the first dial. Now it's on 6. Now it's on 7. So I'm going to turn it the other way. Go all the way to 1. So I turn it all the way to the extreme. Now mallet number 1 is the one that's moving. And I can show you here real quick. You can see mallet 1 is the one that's banging right now. And it's not sounding very good. But we did turn this first pot to get it to mallet number 1. Now we're going to start turning the second pot. You can see that it's starting to sound better. The third pot is the one that determines how, one decides how high, the other one decides how low. So right there, the low is still too high, so it's not even touching the drum. But I start turning it, and now I can hear it. It sounds better. And louder and louder. So you dial it up to whatever sounds good to you. The last pot, this last one here, is the one that determines the position of the rotate for this servo. So now I'm going to start rotating it, and you'll see that that mallet is going to start moving to a different position. And you find the spot where it sounds more pleasing. So say it's there. So now I can come back to my serial monitor and I can get the rotate position for the bass note is 1997. Now I'm going to start rotating it again. Sounds bad. Oh, there we go. And I'm still rotating. Now it went too far. So start backing up and you say, wow, okay, that sounds pretty good to me. So then you come over here and now 1783 is your position for the high note. And you also have the low and high for the actual movement. You have those positions there as well. I'm going to turn this off. So once you have this information written down for each one of the servos, we only did servo number 1, but you would do all seven mallets and get the position for the first position and for the octave smaller, higher pitch note position. And the amount of time it takes to go up and down. I found that it was 150 milliseconds was perfect for my drum. So I'm not trying to figure that out, but if you wanted to, you could add that into the sketch and change the timing, the amount of time you give it to start the move and then move back. And you can change that around. Right now, if you look at the sketch right here, let me see, somewhere in here. No. So we go to bang the drum, and you see that it goes down right here. We have the drum, whichever servo you're working with, mallet servo down position. So you're sending it to the down position, and then you're waiting 150 milliseconds, and then you're sending it back up to the up position. That 150 millisecond will change the sound, because sometimes it might not have enough time to go down and come back up, or you might be giving it too much time and it might just bounce, hit the drum and stay there and just kind of bounce around before the command to go up comes. So you might get like a double hit. But I found 150 was perfect, so I didn't have to look for it. But that's just something to note. But once you have all that information written down on a piece of paper, then you're going to transfer it to your main sketch, and that's how you're going to get the clean sound on every single drum. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the main sketch. Again, this isn't an Arduino tutorial, otherwise this would be a series of videos just on this alone. But it's just a quick overview. Assuming you understand Arduino, you understand that you need to download libraries, specifically this one, Dynamixel to Arduino. You need to know what your COM ports are and what baud rate you're working on. Once your servos are all set to 1 million baud, this sketch will work because it's already set up for that. But essentially, the information you got from that from the previous video where you were calibrating, those numbers are important, and they end up right here. Your mallet rotates for each note. So essentially, this variable it's an array of 8. So it's 0 to 7. 0 to 7. We're not using 0. So we're using 1 through 7, which represents each one of the robots, robot 1, robot 2, etc. So the first piece of the array is always 0 because it's unused. But this is 0. This one is 1, and for 1 you're going to change this number to whatever it is that sounded good on your robot for the low. And this is for robot number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then the high notes, you do the same thing. You take the number you wrote down and replace this one with it. So that way it'll be calibrated to your drum. The mallet up and mallet down positions, you grabbed those as well. On mine, I found that the numbers were pretty close to exact for all of the different robots. They didn't vary. These numbers didn't vary almost anything at all. So rather than putting each individual one that I found, I just wrote the program to just accept this number, which is kind of an average of everything else I picked up from the calibration routine, because they were so close to each other, it didn't matter. So this is what that is. And again, time to move, which is 150 milliseconds, I found that worked for me. This number you might need to change based on your drum, but I think this would probably work for almost all of them. So anyways, the next section is your actual musical notes. I have a little note here that says 0 means no note is not played. 1 represents the low note, meaning the large tongue. A 2 represents a high note. So if you can imagine you're reading a piece of sheet music, and you look at all of the notes, and the note that's the shortest note that's important for you to get, say it's an 8th note is the shortest note in the piece of music you're trying to put in here. Well, that eighth note is basically one piece of time, and that's what you're going to basically kind of transcribe off of. Whatever that note is, the shortest note that you're going to play, that's going to be your note. So if you have a quarter note, that's the equivalent of 2 times. So a 1/8 note would take one of these rows, one of these columns. A quarter note in that instance would be twice as much as an eighth note. So a quarter note would be this, and then a 0, because a 0 means nothing's played, because this one's still ringing. So now this one's going to ring all the way through here for a quarter note. For a half note, all of these would be 0 except for the first one. It would play and then it would ring all the way up to there. So it'd be a 1 or a 2 and then zeros after that to represent how long that note is. So a half note would basically end right here, and an eighth note would just play and then that's it. So then whatever comes after that eighth note, you would put here. A quarter note would be 2 of these. So you'd put either a 1 or a 2, depending which, the big tongue or the small tongue you want to hit. And then you would leave the second one as 0, because you want it to ring all the way through to there. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, you can have, if you have a repeating song, you don't want to have to retype it all again. So you could do this, and then within the code you can just say play that section twice within 4 loops. And that's the way I did this song, so that I have enough room and the memory wouldn't run out. I kind of broke it down into little sections and just repeated them as needed. So all of this is set up. There's really nothing going on here except that it's looking for your servos, making sure they're there and they're communicating properly. This torques them off, sets certain things that need to be set, then it turns them back on again. This section here sets the velocity and the acceleration that I chose for these servos under these circumstances, which is basically full speed, full acceleration. That's what the 0 means. So I'm not slowing them down, I'm not dampening them. That's something you don't want to do when you're hitting on percussive things, because that would kind of mute the note. So there's no dampening in my servos. It's just, it moves as fast as it can in one direction, as fast as it can in the other direction, without any slowing down and smoothing. So right here at the end of, that's, by the way, all of this is only done once. So the last thing it does once is it does start animation, and that animation you'll find it's another little program there that just makes all the servos move in sync, and it just makes it look kind of like a pretty opening, and it's just, they just dance around. It really doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just a way of saying I'm on and check it out, and then it goes into a waiting mode. So all of these are where it says play note A, play note B, play note C. Note C would be like the first tongue, because we're in the key of C. But each one of these basically says I'm going to play, if I need to play A, then it goes to this piece of the program, and this is the stuff that tells it, am I playing a high A or a low A? And if it's a high A, then do this. If it's a low A, then do that. And it preps for the next note as well. So if it knows that the next note is going to be a high one, then it'll rotate the servo to the high note and kind of be there waiting for when it's time to hit that note. It doesn't have to first move to that position and then hit the note. It's already there waiting to just hit it. So that'll make it move a little better. So this is B, C. Each one of this is pretty much a copy of the other one, except each section addresses a different set of servos. And these are just little subroutines that, torque all the servos on, torque all the servos off. Those are just little subroutines that are available. Start animation. But this is really what's going on right here. This is the loop. So the first thing it does is it's checking the button. And in this case, I'm using the button on the Arduino, and it's waiting to see if that button is pushed. If the button gets pushed, then it torques all the servos on, because we don't want to waste battery, assuming you're on a battery, or just keep wasting electricity. So if nobody's pushed the button, then the torque is off, and they're not drawing too much current. So as soon as you push the button, it torques all the servos on. And this, if you want to see how it does it, just go and find the subroutine torque all on, and within that section it'll show you how to do it. But that's what it does. Torque them on. It preps them for the first note. So it looks at that array that we created, and it says, okay, the first note for each one of those servos, and it positions them so they're prepared to play it. And then after that, it plays these sequences. So play note A means, play notes A is basically a piece of that array that we created that tells it what notes to play. Basically, if you're going to repeat one piece, well, each one of these is one of those pieces that you're going to repeat. So right here, I'm playing the section A, and I'm playing it at this speed. So if I change this number, then the tempo changes. Right here, once it finishes that piece, then it goes to this one, and there's a second piece, and then it goes to the third piece, and then you can always go back, replay the second piece, or replay the third piece twice before you go back to the first piece, just like on sheet music. But when it's done, it lowers all the mallets, and then that way they don't just fall. It just sort of slowly lowers them, and then it torques them off, and it goes back into the waiting mode, because the very next thing is it goes back and loops around and starts over, and then it's checking for that button again. So let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. All right, so the first thing we do is we'll turn it on. And it's going through that setup routine that just does a little animation. And they all get torqued off. So right now, if I move it, there's nothing, the servos are basically turned off. They're still getting information, they're still waiting for commands, but they're not sucking up power because all the motors are disconnected. So it's waiting for that button to be pushed. As soon as I push the button, they all jump up and they start playing the first sequence. That's sequence A. This is all sequence A. And then sequence B. And then sequence C. And they all drop, and then they all get torqued off. So now again, there's no power to the servos, and at this point it looped all the way around, and it's looping and looping, waiting for that button to be pushed. And if it's not pushed, then it just loops again and keeps looking for that button. So that's all there is to it. I mean, it gives you a lot of options. It's a really simple program I did, but it could be made much, much more complicated. You could add some MIDI functionality so that you can plug it into your sequencer to Ableton Live or whatever, and have it play through a keyboard, or have it play by itself through MIDI notes, which would be a lot easier to program, but requires additional equipment. And this, I wanted to keep it pretty self-contained and simple. So anyways, that's pretty much the whole tutorial. I don't think I have anything else to mention, but I do want to show you just really quickly some more things that I'm going to give you. I will include the Fusion files, And from those Fusion files, I'll probably also include some step files for people that don't have Fusion, of the assembly. And that way you can build this exact one, or you can modify it and make it better. You can modify it and make it different. You can do whatever you'd like to do with it, as well as possibly figuring out different things. One thing I wanted to mention that I almost forgot: this material that I chose and I put on the article is from McMaster Carr. It works great, except I've noticed it deteriorates pretty fast. I think it's latex based, and it's like a rubber band, like an old rubber band starts to crack, and then eventually it breaks. I kind of feel like this stuff isn't as durable as I thought it would be. So I would consider maybe just using some kind of silicone rubber band, or maybe elastic, some really thin elastic, like bungee cord. There's a lot of ways to go, and you can use this too, but you might have to replace it a little more frequently if it's under direct sunlight or in certain weather conditions. But I thought I'd mention that. And other than that, I think we're pretty much set. I'll show you some of the Fusion files in a second, and that will be included. But just again, bear in mind that those Fusion files are specific to this drum, and if you don't have this drum, it's not gonna fit. Even if you buy this exact drum that I bought from the link I provide, there's no guarantee that it's exactly the same. So you might want to take your own measurements and just double check that everything fits before you print all the parts, and maybe find out that it's just a tiny bit too small or something like that. So just you work with that. You might want to make it adjustable. You might want to make these things adjustable so that you can here, I'll plug that. You can make these so that they can slide in and out, and that way on yours you wouldn't have to worry about that. You might be able to slide them in and lock them down, and be able to accommodate a lot more drums.